"Boarding pass, sir." Her voice was polite, but the hesitation lingered. The billionaire handed over the ticket without a word. She scanned it once. Then again. The machine beeped approval, but her eyes narrowed, as if permission itself needed reconsideration. "You're in first class?" A pause stretched in the air. Passengers behind him shifted impatiently. "Yes," he replied, calm and steady. She forced a smile. It didn't reach her eyes. "Right this way." As he moved down the aisle, heads turned. Some curious, others quietly disapproving. The smell of leather and champagne filled the air. He walked with dignity, every step reminding him this seat was paid for, earned, undeniable, yet still contested. Sliding into his chair, he adjusted his cufflink, his expression unreadable. From the corner of his eye, he caught another attendant whispering to her colleague, lips curling faintly. No words carried, but the meaning did. He closed his eyes for a moment. Narration fills the silence. He had fought for boardrooms, outlasted lawsuits, silenced doubters. Yet here, inside polished walls of luxury, the same shadow followed him. Quiet, familiar, unavoidable. The attendant returned, setting a glass of water on his tray. "Enjoy your flight," she said, tone clipped. He studied her face. She didn't flinch, but the mask was thin. "You hesitated," he said softly, her lips pressed together. "It was nothing." "It never is," he murmured. Her silence confirmed more than denial could. She turned quickly, moving to another passenger. The hum of the cabin grew louder, though no one spoke. And so the journey began, not in the air, but in the silence of a smile that never meant welcome. The cart rattled softly, silver trays sliding neatly into polished hands. Laughter floated from row to row, the clink of cutlery a quiet orchestra of privilege. When it reached his seat, the hum faltered. "Sir, unfortunately, we've run out of the first-class meal options." Her voice was clipped, rehearsed, too precise. She placed a small packet of pretzels before him. "This is what we can offer." He stared at it, then at her. His tone was even. "Everyone else seems to have been served." A pause. The silence spread like a stain. Passengers shifted but kept their eyes fixed forward. "The kitchen sometimes miscalculates," she said. Her hand rested too long on the cart handle. "Miscalculates." He repeated the word slowly, letting it settle. Yet the miscalculation always finds the same face. Her throat tightened, but she said nothing. Narration filled the quiet. He had lived enough years to recognize the shape of denial. It never shouted. It smiled, withheld, and called the absence an accident. The man in the seat across coughed, pretending distraction. The woman beside him glanced, then looked quickly away. Silence became complicity. He pushed the pretzels back. "Keep them." Her lips pressed tight. For a second, something flickered, nervousness or maybe shame. Then the mask returned. "As you wish." She turned sharply, the cart moving on. The smell of roasted lamb drifted from the row ahead, filling the air with what was denied. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the untouched glass of water at his side. Hunger was not the wound. The wound was being reminded that even after paying the highest price, some doors refused to open, and everyone else knew it too. He sat back, arms resting lightly on the chair, gaze fixed straight ahead. The untouched glass of water caught the dim cabin light, a quiet witness. The attendant lingered a few rows away, her voice cheerful for others. For him, she did not return. A passenger across the aisle leaned slightly. You're not eating?" He answered without turning. "I wasn't served." The man cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Maybe. A mistake." He gave a small nod, no more. Silence pressed harder than argument ever could. Narration filled the hush. He had learned long ago that fury gave them excuses, but silence gave them mirrors. And mirrors were heavier than fists. The attendant returned once, avoiding his eyes. "Is there anything else you'd like?" He looked at her, steady, wordless. Her smile wavered. She gripped the tray tighter. "Sir?" Still nothing. It was not refusal. It was something sharper, exposure. In that silence, her rehearsed politeness trembled, stripped bare. Passengers nearby shifted, whispering low. A woman 2 seats back muttered, "Why him?" The question landed heavier than accusation. The attendant finally stepped away. The cabin grew thick with tension. Every laugh now forced, every clink too sharp. Narration. In stillness, he turned their gaze back on themselves. The wound remained, but dignity stood taller than insult. Silence spoke louder than any protest could. He sipped the water slowly, eyes forward, posture unbroken. The glass touched down gently on the tray, final, deliberate. No words followed. And yet, in that wordless moment, the balance in the cabin shifted. Small, undeniable, irreversible. He leaned back, the hum of the engine steady, but his mind broke away from the cabin. The silence he held on the plane stirred something older, heavier. A memory surfaced, a school cafeteria. His younger self, tray in hand, told to sit at the other table. No reason, just the look on their faces. "Not here," a boy had said. 2 words, sharp enough to scar. Now in first class, the same words rang without being spoken. His brother's voice years ago. "One day, money will buy us a seat where no one can move us." Yet here he was, bought and paid for, still denied. The man beside him cleared his throat again. "You're awfully calm about this," he answered slowly, eyes still forward. "It's not the first time. It's never the last." The passenger looked away, ashamed. His silence was louder than comfort. Narration pressed in. Every rejection had the same taste, bitter, metallic. They called it progress when the door opened halfway, but the locks had never really changed. His hand tightened on the armrest. Not anger and memory. The same wound reopened in silk and leather, lit by chandeliers. He whispered, almost to himself, "Funny. Wealth builds the walls higher, but the cracks stay the same." The attendant passed again, avoiding him. He didn't move, didn't ask, didn't plead, because this was not just about food. It was the cafeteria, the denied interview, the closed door, all stitched into one quiet refusal. Narration closed in. Old wounds don't vanish. They sit quietly, waiting for moments like this, when silence isn't just strength, it's survival. The plane's lights dimmed, settling into the soft hush of night travel. He leaned forward, eyes steady, voice lower than a murmur. "You'll regret that choice." The words barely carried, but they cut sharper than any shout. The attendant froze mid-step, her hand hovering over the tray. She turned quickly, pretending not to hear, but her shoulders stiffened. The other passengers shifted in their seats, suddenly unsure where to rest their eyes. Silence stretched. The hum of the engine swallowed everything, but his whisper clung to the air, heavier than noise. The man beside him leaned closer, uneasy. "What did you mean by that?" He didn't look at him. His gaze stayed fixed ahead. "I meant it wasn't about food." The passenger blinked, lost. "Then what?" He cut him short, voice still even. "It's about every closed door. Every smirk that said, 'You don't belong here.' Tonight she served it cold. Tomorrow it will burn." Narration pressed in. Humiliation never vanishes. It lingers, seeps into the bones, until it finds a place to burn. Some fires rage wild, others wait, silent, controlled, inevitable. The attendant passed again, eyes lowered now. No word, no glance, just a quickened pace, as though distance could erase the sting of what she heard. He leaned back, calm once more, though the flame inside him was awake. Narration closed. Power does not always roar when wounded. Sometimes it whispers, and a whisper, if carried long enough, can set entire empires aflame. The cabin remained quiet, but beneath its luxury glow, something irreversible had been planted. A promise, soft as breath, sharp as fire. The whisper still lingered in the cabin, but far beyond the plane, history stirred. Files long locked away, complaints dismissed with neat signatures, and names buried in silence began to breathe again. In his office, one of the triplets unfolded a yellowed folder. Headlines from decades ago: complaint dismissed, airline cleared. Underneath, letters from flight attendants, handwritten, trembling words of bias and mistreatment, stamped, closed. His brother leaned over, reading the lines. "They buried them. They always do," he replied, voice flat. "But dust doesn't erase. It waits." Silence. The weight of those pages filled the room heavier than words. A younger lawyer they trusted, scanning the documents, whispered, "These are enough to break them now." The protagonist's gaze hardened. Enough? These were enough back then. They just weren't allowed to matter. Narration pressed in. Every archive told the same story. Systems polished to protect themselves, never the wounded. But even forgotten paper bleeds when reopened. Another clipping showed a face, an older black pilot who once filed for discrimination, his case tossed aside. The protagonist traced the photo with his thumb, remembering a time. "I spoke once." They turned. It was an older woman, a retired attendant they had called in to help piece the past together. Her hands trembled against her coffee cup. "No one listened?" the brother asked. She gave a short, tired laugh. "They listened. Then they ruined me." The room stilled. "I filed the report. Told them about the slurs, the way passengers were treated different if they looked like me. Next week, my schedule disappeared. Next month, my name was dirt. They called me difficult. Said I was unstable." Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. She stared into the cup, steady. The younger lawyer whispered, "They erased you. They buried me alive," she said. "And the worst part, others saw it. And they stayed quiet, because silence kept their paychecks safe." Narration pressed in. Punishment wasn't loud. It was quiet, systematic, stitched into paperwork, whispered in back offices, until careers disappeared like they were never there. Another man in the room, a former whistleblower, nodded slowly. "They left me standing at the gate one morning. Badge canceled. No reason, no goodbye. Just gone." The protagonist leaned forward, voice low. "And you still came here?" "Still told me," the man met his eyes. "Because silence didn't save me either. It just made me invisible. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the hum of an old air vent filled the space. Then the protagonist whispered almost to himself, "They thought fear would last forever." No one answered. They didn't need to. The truth was already standing in the room, heavier than shame, waiting to be carried forward. The room hadn't fully settled after the stories. Papers lay open, untouched. The air itself seemed bruised. That was when an older man, sitting half-hidden near the window, cleared his throat. His voice carried years of knowing. "You've fought boardrooms, lawsuits, senators. But this?" He paused, searching the billionaire's eyes. "This isn't numbers. It's something else. Are you sure you want to carry it?" The question hung. Like smoke, no one wanted to breathe. The billionaire leaned back, his face calm, almost still. "It was never about the meal," he said quietly. "Not the tray. Not the crew. It's about memory. About every silence we swallowed when they told us to stay small, stay polite, stay invisible." The man frowned but didn't interrupt. "They fed us shame instead of food. That's the part people don't see. Every refusal stacks on the last one. And if you don't answer it, if you don't name it, it becomes the air your children breathe." Silence pressed in. Even the hum of the light above seemed softer. The old friend shifted. "And if the cost is too high?" The billionaire's reply came slower this time, but sharper. "The cost of silence was higher. We've been paying it our whole lives." Narration cut through, steady. Truth spoken softly has more weight than any shout. It doesn't echo, it sinks, finds its place, and stays. No one argued after that. There was no need. The words had already done their work, crawling under the skin, settling where memory hides. The old friend finally nodded once, eyes lowered, not in defeat but in quiet agreement. And the room, still heavy, began to feel like a place where silence no longer ruled. The nod from his old friend still lingered when the outside world cracked open. Screens lit up, timelines bursting. A photo from the cabin, just one frame, his untouched tray against the glow of privilege, spread faster than words could catch it. Hashtags burned through feeds, a rhythm of anger and awe. But he said nothing, not a post. Not a statement. Not a single word. Inside the silence, his team wrestled with panic. "We should get ahead of this," one muttered, scrolling furiously. "A press release, no." His voice was steady, almost gentle. Another chimed in, sharper. "If you don't speak, they'll define it for you." He looked at them, then back at the frozen image on the screen. "They already defined it the moment they refused the meal. My silence only reminds them what it tasted like." The room fell quiet. Even the critics online were unsettled. Some demanded fury, others begged for forgiveness, but the absence of his voice pulled them deeper. Narration carried the weight. Once, silence had been forced on him. Now it was a choice. "And nothing terrifies power more than restraint, sir." The aide whispered, softer this time. "Are you sure this is the way?" He didn't answer immediately. His hand rested on the table, calm, unmoving. Finally, he breathed out, "They shouted at us for years. Maybe now they should learn how silence sounds." The feed refreshed again, louder, wilder. Arguments raged. Empires trembled. And through it all, his quiet became the sharpest voice in the room. Boardrooms filled before sunrise. Executives shuffled papers. Screens flashed red and someone whispered, "This is spiraling." The silence outside their walls had turned into a storm inside them. "We need a statement," one voice cracked. Another snapped back, "Apologies make us look guilty." "Then what? We wait while he holds the world in his hand?" The chairman rubbed his temple, muttering, "He hasn't spoken. That's the worst part. You can't fight a man who won't play." Narration cut through the tension. Revenge does not roar. It waits. It lingers like smoke in the walls, quiet enough to be forgotten until it chokes. An assistant entered, hesitant, holding a memo. "Sir, our investors want assurance." "They're asking—" The chairman slammed his pen down. "Assurance of what? That we still control the story?" He leaned back, voice low. "The story left this building the moment we denied him." A pause stretched. No one breathed too loudly. Every whisper felt dangerous, every excuse fragile. Meanwhile, across town, he sat in silence. No cameras, no reporters, just him, the weight of memory steady on his shoulders. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Their panic was his echo. "Do you think he'll sue?" a director asked, almost begging. "No," the chairman whispered, voice thin. "He doesn't need a courtroom. He has patience." Narration returned, softer now. Stillness became his weapon, stretched over hours, days, weeks. And like a shadow across the runway, it hovered unseen, waiting for arrogance to settle before the strike. The silence thickened, unbearable. Every tick of the clock sounded like footsteps approaching. The courtroom did not hum with justice. It buzzed with spectacle. Lights cracked like whips, cameras blinked like restless eyes, and every corner felt crowded with judgment. Executives in pressed suits clung to their dignity, but the fabric sagged under the weight of fear. A reporter hissed into her mic. "The man at the center of it all hasn't spoken a single word," another cut in. "And yet the silence has drowned out every defense." The judge adjusted his glasses, eyes sweeping the room. "We will begin shortly." But no one truly waited for his voice. They waited for him, the one who had spoken least, yet carried the most. On the defense bench, a trembling lawyer leaned close to his client. "Say something, anything, they'll crucify us if you don't." The executive's lips cracked dry. What do I say to silence? Across the aisle, the crew sat stiff, uniforms neat but spirits undone. One muttered, barely audible, "We just followed rules." Another whispered back, "Rules written for someone else." Narration pressed like a shadow. The courtroom was theater, but he was not an actor. He needed no script, no speech. His silence became the testimony, louder than pages of law. The bailiff called his name. The room shifted forward, breaths held. He stood slowly, shoulders steady. He did not look at the cameras. He looked at the men who had hidden behind them. One sentence could have burned the room. Instead, he said nothing. Just a glance, just a pause. And in that pause, suits wilted, lenses trembled, and the audience leaned deeper into the quiet that refused to break. The pause had weighed longer than any speech. Then when the silence seemed unbearable, his voice finally came. Calm, steady, unhurried. They told me I did not belong. Heads snapped up. Pens froze mid-scratch. The executives blinked like men caught in daylight after years of shade. His words didn't rise. They cut softly. But when you own the sky, no one decides where you sit. The air collapsed into stillness. Not outrage, not applause. Just the sound of walls cracking. One executive leaned forward, whispering to his lawyer, "He's bluffing." His hand shook as he spoke. The lawyer didn't answer. His eyes had already betrayed defeat. Across the aisle, a flight attendant whispered, voice broken, "We thought he was just another passenger." Another corrected softly, "No, he was the plane." Narration pressed like gravity. It wasn't volume that turned the room. It was control. Control that came without effort, without anger. Control that stripped arrogance of its disguise. The judge tried to steady the room. Order. But even his gavel sounded hollow. The man didn't continue. He had no need. His whisper lingered longer than thunder. An executive, cheeks wet though he didn't notice, murmured, "We ruined everything over a meal." His colleague tried to hush him, but the cameras had caught it, and in that moment, power shifted. Not with shouts, not with fists, but with a truth spoken softly enough to echo forever. He sat down, not triumphant, not smiling, just steady. The world leaned closer, desperate to hear more. But he gave them only silence again, because sometimes one whisper is enough to bring an empire down. The cameras still burned hot when the first cracks deepened. A trembling attendant, voice hardly her own, leaned forward. I was just following orders." The words hung heavier than any confession. Her eyes darted toward the executives as if they could shield her, but none moved. Their silence was their own sentence. He looked at her, steady, unshaken. And that's how history always excuses cruelty. The room froze. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. That single line carried centuries, folding them into one undeniable truth. A reporter whispered into his mic, almost reverent, "Did you hear that?" The words spread instantly, replaying on every lens. Every screen, narration lingered. Generations of men had hidden behind those same words. Orders, protocol, policy. As if cruelty written on paper became anything less than cruelty in flesh. The attendant's lips quivered. "I didn't mean..." She stopped, her throat closing around the lie she could no longer tell. An executive muttered under his breath, "This will ruin us," his colleague whispered back. "It already has." The weight of history shifted. For once, excuses did not find purchase. The courtroom did not rush to forgive. It did not nod along. It simply watched. And in that stillness, the mask of authority crumbled. The man did not press further. He gave her no lecture, no sermon. He simply sat back, letting silence finish what words had started. Because sometimes the most powerful blow is not struck, it is withheld, leaving the guilty to collapse beneath the echo of their own defense. And so, history's old excuse met its end, not with fire, not with fury, but with a whisper that left no air for denial. The courtroom dispersed, but the stain lingered. By morning, offices once guarded by glass walls began to hollow out. Cardboard boxes stacked in corners, the click of tape louder than the chatter that used to fill the halls. An executive, tie loosened, whispered to another as they packed framed photos. "It wasn't supposed to end like this." The reply came flat. "It ended the moment we thought silence would cover it." Their hands moved slower than their thoughts. Every pen, every folder lifted into a box carried the weight of arrogance turned fragile. Elsewhere, the flight attendant sat on her bed, uniform draped across her lap. Her phone lit her tired face as she scrolled job postings. Each rejection email burned sharper than the man's words had in court. She whispered into the dark, as if confessing to no one. "I thought it was just a meal." Narration pressed in. For them, it had been habit. For him, it had been dignity. And when dignity was denied, even the smallest act revealed the size of the empire that stood behind it. Another executive carried his box past the empty receptionist's desk. Reporters waited at the door, cameras flashing, but he kept his head down. No statements. No defense left. Do you think he's satisfied now? One muttered. No, came the answer, almost a sigh. Men like him don't need satisfaction. They need memory, and we gave him that. The silence inside the building deepened. No fire alarms, no shouting, no collapse with noise. Power didn't fall like stone. It drained like air, leaving rooms hollow, chairs cold, and reputations scattered across cardboard and regret. And so, power packed its boxes. Too quiet to notice until it was already gone. The boxes were gone. The offices hollow, but memory lingered heavier than furniture. In a small kitchen, the flight attendant sat alone. The plate before her was untouched. Chicken, bread, a glass of water sweating beside it. She pushed the fork once, then stopped. Her mother's voice drifted from the doorway. "You're not eating?" "I can't," she whispered. Every bite feels stolen. The silence between them grew thick. Her mother stepped closer, resting a hand on her shoulder. "It was just a meal," the words struck sharp. She shook her head. "No, Ma, it was never just a meal. It was what they thought he was worth." Across the city, he sat in his penthouse. The city lights stretched beneath him, yet his eyes weren't on them. The same dinner lay on his table, untouched, steam long faded. His assistant hovered at the door. "You should eat, sir," he answered softly without looking up. "I'm not hungry," the assistant hesitated. "They've lost everything. Isn't that enough?" His hand brushed the rim of the plate, slow, deliberate. "Enough? No, justice isn't food on my table. Justice is them remembering every time they see an empty chair." Narration lingered. For him, revenge wasn't sweetness. It wasn't triumph. It was memory stitched into silence, a reminder no title, no boardroom, no tailored suit could erase. The woman in the kitchen lifted her plate and set it back down, still full. He, miles away, pushed his aside as well. 2 rooms, 2 souls, bound by the weight of what was denied, an untouched meal, and in that stillness, dignity lived where hunger could not. The meals remained untouched, but the silence did not. It stretched beyond kitchens and penthouses, echoing through offices, terminals, and living rooms. Weeks passed. Headlines that once screamed outrage softened, their ink fading into smaller columns. Yet the echoes of what happened refused to vanish. A junior attendant leaned across her training desk. "They've changed the manual," she whispered to a colleague. "It says passengers must be treated equally no matter what," her colleague smirked, half bitter. Took them long enough. In another corner of the city, an executive sat before a compliance seminar, eyes hollow, pen tapping without rhythm. The instructor's words rang flat. "Diversity isn't policy. It's survival." No applause followed. Just silence, heavier than any lecture. At a boarding gate, an old man watched as a young black passenger stood tall while presenting his ticket. The attendant smiled nervously, then said with unusual care, "Welcome aboard, sir." The man's wife gripped his hand. They exchanged no words. None were needed. Narration pressed gently. This was never about punishing one woman or emptying offices. It was about remembrance. A remembrance that shifts how people sit, how they look at one another, how they hesitate before cruelty. He walked once more through an airport lobby, unnoticed, unbothered. Phones buzzed nearby, but no one raised theirs at him. The silence that once cut him down now parted paths for him to pass. "They called it revenge," the narrator whispered. But for him, it was never that. Revenge burns fast. Remembrance lingers. And remembrance, sharper than punishment, outlives headlines. The camera held the stillness of a terminal at dusk. People moving, voices low, echoes layered, and for once, silence was not his burden. It was his justice.